Welcome and thank you for being with us this afternoon. My name is Javier Becerra. I have the privilege of being the chairman of the Democratic Caucus. I am joined today by the ranking member on the Democratic side on the Immigration Subcommittee and a former immigration attorney, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California. We're joined by Congressman Ruben Gallego, who was the gentleman in the Armed Services Committee who carried an amendment, which was successful in committee, to allow the Department of Defense to consider allowing those who qualified for DACA to be eligible to provide service to our country by enlisting. And we thank him for that fight that he made there. We believe we'll be joined by colleague, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke of New York. And we are fortunate to have with us someone who will speak to us from her personal experience. Mrs. Rosario Reyes will be here with us to tell us about her particular circumstance, and we are thankful that she is here, and we are here because of people like Mrs. Reyes to try to make sure that we move forward. Today was a day when the President's executive action to help parents of U.S. citizens, children, and lawful permanent resident children would have had an opportunity to apply for the DAPA program, the Executive Action Program for Parents. Unfortunately, because there are some who oppose giving these families an opportunity not only to stay together, but to come out of the shadows. Right now, that action by the President is stuck in the courts. Many of us firmly believe that the courts, after reviewing the lawsuit against the President's executive action, that they will move to undo the lower court's decision to put a hold on the President's executive action. That will allow us finally to move forward not only with the executive action the President has proposed for the parents of U.S. citizen children and lawful permanent resident children, but also for the expansion of the DACA program, which was meant to help dreamer young men and women in our country. And we are working hard with the administration, with many of our colleagues here in Congress, to try to make progress here, to finally get some common sense immigration reform. We believe that at the end of the day, this is not only good for families, it is good for our businesses in this country, it's good for jobs, and it's absolutely the best thing we could do for our economy to get it moving and create more jobs. And so we look forward to working with everyone who wants to see us finally fix this broken immigration system to move forward. And on the day when the DAPA program should have started, we're here to say we're ready and waiting for the opportunity to get going to help all these families who want to come out of the shadows. Viene pronto ese día, esperamos, de cuando vamos a poder decirle a los padres de hijos ciudadanos y de hijos que son residentes legales que van a tener la oportunidad de entregar su solicitud para el programa que empezó o quiere empezar el presidente de DAPA, y también para esos estudiantes que califican bajo el programa de DACA. Esperamos también poder expandir ese programa. Viene pronto, prepárense, y ojalá en unos cuantas semanas, meses o tal vez días podamos darles las noticias de cómo podemos manejar este asunto adelante. With that, let me now turn to our ranking member from the Immigration Subcommittee, Zoe Lofgren.
Thank you very much. You know, last November, President Obama, along with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, announced a series of administrative reforms to our broken immigration system. Now, that was something that could make the situation more rational because Congress never got its act together. The Republicans refused to put the bipartisan Senate bill on the floor of the House for a vote, even though we know that had that happened, it would have passed. We did a count on both sides of the aisle. So while we are failing to act, some kind of rationality needed to be brought to this system. Now, here's the background. Each year, Congress appropriates enough money to remove about 4% of the undocumented population in the United States. And so obviously, some kind of determination needs to be made on priorities. And in fact, when Congress passed the Homeland Security bill, they directed the Secretary of Homeland Security to set priorities on immigration enforcement, which is exactly what has happened in this case. Now, in the past, starting with President Eisenhower, Presidents have taken similar actions to give what's called deferred action for people who are not immigration priorities. So what the president did in this case was not that different than what presidents, both Republican and Democratic, have done for many years. However, the difference this time are Republicans bringing lawsuits. The Republican governors brought a lawsuit, and they did some forum shopping. They found probably the worst judge in the United States in Texas and filed the case there. And he, having read the decision he made a very political decision that's at odds with the precedents set by the Supreme Court and his own Fifth Circuit. And he enjoined this action from going forward. Now, I led an effort. We had 181 Democratic members of the House that signed what's called a Friend of the Court brief to the Fifth Circuit. I think it set some kind of record for the number of House members signing a brief saying that what the president did was lawful and asking the court to act swiftly to stop this injunction. But they haven't acted yet, and it looks like we're not going to see oral arguments for the full case until maybe July. At the same time, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, remember him from Arizona, filed a lawsuit here in the District of Columbia with the same kind of allegations made in Texas. The district court in D.C. was not politicized, and they threw that case out of court because the precedents are such that there's no standing. There's no standing for that kind of case to proceed. Now, that's being appealed. We don't have a decision yet, but based on the comments made by the appellate court, it looks like they're going to throw Sheriff Joe out of court one more time. Now, this is the legal background, but the truth is that millions of people are being punished because Republicans have brought these lawsuits. And so we would hope that we could get swift action out of our courts. We encourage the president to continue to do the things that he can, but it's not a substitute for amending the law. And that is where Congress has completely dropped the ball. So we hope that our Republican colleagues will get with it, change the law, reform top to bottom, and stop bringing these groundless lawsuits. Thank you very much.
So thank you. A new member who has hit the ground running, has been very active on so many issues, including on the issues of immigration, including his work on the Armed Services Committee. From Arizona, Ruben Gallego.
Thank you, Chairman. Today is actually a sad day when it should have been a day of joy for many of our immigrant families in this country. A day that could have assured some families that they're going to be able to stay together is now a day that is going to be up in the air whether some of these families will be able to enjoy living the American dream together. And it's sad that the party that calls themselves the party of family values, the Republican Party, are doing the most anti-family thing possible you could do, which is separate mothers from their children, fathers from their children, and brothers from their sisters. And that is not family values. That is quite the opposite of that. But this is what we're seeing from this Republican Party, whether it's in the courts or in Congress. Their goal is not just to stop any type of reform, but also to instill fear within the immigrant community and doubt. And I think that's something that, whether it was the Homeland Security holdup, where they almost shut down Homeland Security, whether it's these lawsuits where they clearly went judge shopping to try to find the judge that would actually ensure an injunction on the president's willful law, they will continue to do this. In my state, in Arizona, I've been fighting these fights since even prior to being in elected office, whether it was as an activist trying to help a lot of our dreamers avoid Sheriff Joe Arpaio and many of the other laws. And it was still in that state that Republicans were leading the fight. So it came as no surprise to me that a sense of Congress that I introduced and got out of committee in a bipartisan manner was politicized by the Steve King wing of the Republican Party. And that's what we have right now. We know that had we had the opportunity and brought down the vote last year for comprehensive immigration reform, it would have passed in the House. But just like then and just like now, the Republican Party is being led by the Steve King wing of the Republican Party, which has no compromise, looks to ignore compromise when it comes to comprehensive immigration reform, and more likely wants to instill fear within that community. And so I'd like to remind them to please think about the families that they're affecting, to stop attacking this community, and that these mean-spirited lawsuits that is keeping hardworking immigrant families apart and in limbo are really going to hurt our local, state, and national economy, as well as really hurting those families personally. I'm confident that these court cases will side with us in the end, and I'm confident, though, in the meantime, that our families will remember both our Dreamer families and all the supporters who was the party that actually tried to separate them and who were there trying to help them the whole time. And I think there will be a lot of repercussions when it comes to time to vote because of that. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Ruben. Let me now ask someone who is the reason why the president has proposed this executive action. Mrs. Rosario Reyes is someone who is directly affected by the president's executive action called DAPA for parents, and she's directly affected by the lawsuits by those who oppose sensible immigration reform, who have now made it impossible for her to move forward with the DAPA application. Déjame pedirle a la señora Rosario Reyes que nos dé unas palabras de su circunstancia. Señora Reyes.
Muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Rosario Reyes.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosario Reyes.
Entré a los Estados Unidos en febrero del 2004.
I entered the United States in February of 2004.
Tengo 3 hijos, un Dreamers, uno en El Salvador y un ciudadano americano.
I've got 3 kids. One is a dreamer, one is in El Salvador, and one is a U.S. citizen by the name of Victor.
Vine buscando como el sueño americano oportunidades de vida mejores para mis hijos y pues el día de mañana pues que sean ellos pues profesionales.
I came to this country looking for a brighter future for my kids, hoping for a better future for all of us, and that one day they'll be professionals.
Soy una mujer de hogar, pagamos impuestos como cualquiera de todos que estamos acá. No los ha detenido la policía en ningún momento.
I'm a housewife, and my husband and I pay our taxes like everyone else, and we've not been involved with the law in any criminal situation, and we just want a better life.
Mi sueño sería un día pues que se diera el DAPA para esa oportunidad de poder tener una casa y ofrecer un mejor futuro a mis hijos.
I hope that DAPA does pass because it will allow us to plan ahead and buy a home and provide better for our children.
Y un día pues poder cumplir mi sueño que dejé a mi hijo José Ramón de 2 años en El Salvador, ahora tiene 13, pues me muero por darle un abrazo, por decirle cuánto le amo.
And so for me, I just hope one day to fulfill my dream, which is I left my son in El Salvador when he was 2 years old, and one day I hope to see him and embrace him and tell him how much I love him.
Es tan duro pasar Navidades aquí y saber que un pedazo de tu corazón está en otro país y no poder abrazarle y no decirle que le amamos. Pienso que ya basta de tanta separación de familias.
It's so difficult to be separated from your loved one, someone that you love so dearly and can't be near them and to hold them and tell them how much you love them. And I think it's now time to end this family separations.
Hago voluntariados en mi comunidad. Trabajo para las comunidades de San Camilo, ayudando a familias, no porque me paguen nada, sino para salir adelante y que las familias dejen de tener miedo y luchemos por ese sueño que hemos venido a conseguir.
So I'm a volunteer in my community. I volunteer for St. Camille's Church, and I try to help out mothers and parents that need assistance to move forward. And I just hope that one day we can all live a better life.
Gracias.
Señora Reyes, muchas gracias por darnos los acontecimientos de sus experiencias. Thank you for giving us a sense of your story. And I want to now ask a colleague who has been a champion on immigration reform as well, who has a district in New York that has many individuals as constituents who are immigrants as well. The Congresswoman from New York, Yvette Clarke.
Let me thank everyone in the press for coming here today. I'd like to thank my esteemed colleague, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, Mr. Javier Becerra, as well as Congressman Ruben Gallego, Congressional Hispanic Caucus Whip, as well as Rocio Sainez, International Executive Vice President of SEIU, Cristina Jimenez, Managing Director of the United We Dream. You have all each demonstrated a profound commitment to the families and children who aspire to share fully in the promise and blessings of American life. And we are here today to stand in opposition to the unlawful, indeed unconstitutional delay in the implementation of the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Lawful Permanent Residents, referred to as DAPA, which will allow the parents of children who are citizens or legal permanent residents who themselves lack legal status in the United States to avoid deportation and obtain authorization to work, and expanded deferred action for childhood arrivals, referred to as DAPA. With DAPA and expanded DACA, millions of people will not have to fear that a knock on the door in the middle of the night could result in the forcible separation of their family. And millions of the people would love to have the opportunity to work with all the rights guaranteed to our workers under the law. These millions of Americans will finally have an opportunity to become fully legal and documented participants in our civil society. Yet Judge Andrew S. Hainan of the Southern District of Texas chose to delay the implementation of these programs under the false assumption that President Obama does not have the proper legal authority, despite the fact that similar programs were implemented by President Ronald Reagan and President George H.W. Bush. Experts in constitutional law are almost entirely unanimous in their agreement that President Obama, as our chief executive, has the same authority. Yet, President Obama has not been accorded the same deference as President Reagan or President Bush. As a result, the decision threatens millions of individuals with families, with family fragmentation and deportation. It is important to note that notwithstanding the protests and rhetoric of the Republican majority, President Obama acted only after several attempts to work with Republicans and Democrats on comprehensive immigration reform, and it had become impossible and an exercise in futility after the Republicans in the House of Representatives refused to even allow a debate on the issue. We know that the votes are there. President Obama acted under his authority because under the Republican leadership, Congress has refused to act on immigration reform with terrible consequences, both for the community that I represent in Brooklyn and for our nation as a whole. Alongside several of my colleagues, I had encouraged President Obama to exercise his authority as our chief executive responsible for the enforcement of federal laws to suspend most deportation proceedings, and I commend him for his decision to act in the interest of American families and children. Now we have the responsibility to continue and strengthen our support of President Obama. Across the United States, people of goodwill and good conscience have organized in support of DAPA and DACA, and to demand that Congress finally debate comprehensive immigration reform. The millions of people whose legal status remain uncertain cannot afford for this unconstitutional delay to continue. Their stories are an example of the best of our traditions as a people. When the United States has welcomed immigrants, both the immigrants themselves, their children and grandchildren, and our society as a whole have flourished. Today, like the generations that have preceded us, we have the same concerns before us right now, and a moral imperative, an economic incentive, and a national responsibility to act in support of their aspirations. So I thank you for coming here today. It is important that we keep the pressure on the courts to do the right thing by the families that populate our communities. America is a nation built by immigrants for immigrants. Thank you.
Yvette, thank you. Finally, I'd like to ask someone who has direct experience, personal experience on this as well, and can tell us what it feels like as another individual who is waiting for word from the courts on DAPA and on DACA. Let me ask Cristina Jimenez to please come forward.
Thank you. And I thank you for your leadership, Congressman Becerra. And thanks to all of you, all of the members of Congress here, for standing and really showing our community that you're standing with us. My name is Cristina Jimenez, and I am with the United We Dream Network. We're the largest immigrant youth-led network in the country. And today, I was supposed to be helping my parents, who are here in this picture. They're in New York, couldn't be here with me. I was supposed to be helping them out with their application for the Deferred Action Program. Last November, when I called my dad, he told me over the phone crying that he could not wait until the day that he will file that application. El día de hoy, yo estaba supuesta estar con mis papás de Nueva York, Ligia y Fausto, ayudándoles a ellos a llenar esa aplicación del programa de acción diferida. Cuando yo lo llamé en noviembre y le dije, papá, ganamos, él lloró por el teléfono y me dijo que esperaba el día que iba a llenar ese formulario. But there's one thing that is standing in the way. And that one thing, it's heartless Republican politics here. Hay una cosa que está bloqueando el camino para que mis padres puedan llenar esa aplicación, y son las políticas republicanas que no tienen corazón. Our community led a very courageous campaign to win this program. Dreamers led a historic campaign to win the Deferred Action Program in 2012, and we fought hard with our communities all across the country to win this campaign in November. But instead of helping my parents file that application today, my parents are still living in fear. They're still in the shadows. In fact, my dad continues to be fearful of driving his car to work without a driver's license. And that all falls under the responsibility of Republicans. El día de hoy, en vez de que mis padres puedan tener ese alivio migratorio, están todavía con miedo de deportación, con miedo de hasta manejar sus carros al trabajo, porque no tienen acceso a licencias de conducir. And that is the reality for all immigrants across the country, all of them who could have been filing those applications today. So what stands in the way is Republican leaders who filed a lawsuit to put our communities on hold of deportation relief. Tell me, who are the Republican leaders that have been standing against this lawsuit and with our communities? I have seen none. ¿Cuál republicano ha salido en contra de esta demanda legal y a favor de nuestras comunidades? Ninguno. And what United We Dream and our community is committed to do is to ensure that every single person in our community knows who is standing in the way of deportation relief and from our families to reach their dreams. That's why we have a group of dreamers and hundreds of community members in Austin, Texas, from United We Dream, who are going to be outside Governor Abbott's house in Texas, who is one of the leaders behind this lawsuit. And they're going to be protesting. And they're going to be showing to our community one of the Republican leaders that is standing in the way of our families reaching deportation relief. Vamos a asegurarnos que cada miembro de nuestra comunidad sepa cuáles son los líderes políticos que están con nosotros y cuáles están en contra de nuestra comunidad. Es por eso que el día de hoy en Austin, en Texas, tenemos soñadores y miembros de la comunidad que van a protestar fuera de la casa del gobernador Abbott de Texas, que ha sido uno de los líderes que ha puesto esta demanda legal para parar los sueños de nuestra comunidad, para que todos sepan quién está con nosotros y quién no está con nuestra comunidad. Y esto va a tener implicaciones para las elecciones también. And all of this is going to have implications for how people understand who's with us, who's not with us, and who they're going to vote for in the election cycle. The reality is that all Republicans have done is promote an agenda of mass deportation, have provided no solution for our communities. And we are here, and I stand here with you honestly outraged at the fact that I worked so hard. I've been organizing for over 10 years for my families, for immigrant families all across the country. And there's just one lawsuit filed by Republicans that is standing in the way of relief from deportation. But as much as I'm outraged and frustrated, and that's probably how many people in our community feel, I am also very determined, and I know our community is very determined to continue to push, to fight, to defend our victory in the streets, in the courts, wherever we need to do it. Because the same way in which we won DACA, which many said it was impossible, and we won DAPA, which many say it was impossible, we will one day very soon be celebrating my parents who are going to be filing for that application and millions of parents all across the country who will be doing that. La verdad es que nuestra comunidad ya ha ganado y estamos frustrados con esta política republicana, pero eso no quiere decir que perdemos la esperanza y más que todo el compromiso con la comunidad para seguir luchando, porque de la misma manera que ganamos DACA y ganamos DAPA, vamos a ganar esta demanda legal y vamos a llegar al día en que vamos a estar llenando esas aplicaciones. Lo último que nuestra comunidad pierde es la esperanza y vamos a asegurarnos que seguimos comprometidos en esta pelea. Thank you.
Cristina, thank you very much, and share those Wheaties with us. We want to eat the same thing you've been eating. Let me now ask a colleague and one of our leaders here in the House of Representatives who hails from the state of New Mexico and someone we turn to for guidance and support as well, our Congressman from New Mexico, Ben Ray Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as we gather again today, I think we're reminded of what's happening all across America. And I would just say that the president took serious action when he was listening to families all across America. And if you talk about American values, what's more American than keeping families together? Of showing that respect and dignity to our brothers and sisters, people that we go to church with, go to school with, maybe have a hot dog at a Little League game. That's what we're talking about here. The president's actions were about accountability, about national security, and about preserving the essence of keeping a family together. And sadly, not only through the lawsuit that was filed by our Republican colleagues that stood in the face of dreamers and keeping families together, last week when Congressman Ruben Gallego had offered a thoughtful amendment and language that dreamers all across America that want to serve to protect the only nation that they have ever known, that Republicans had the audacity to say no. Again, we've seen not only with Republicans' refusal to move a piece of legislation that would provide support to fund the Department of Homeland Security, where Republicans put their political security before they put national security on the table. Yet again, last week, they did the same thing, and with this lawsuit, they have done it again. Let's just stand together to do the right thing. When the faith-based organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, activists, communities, all across America agree on this policy, let's find a way to get this done. And so to all the dreamers out there, we just want to tell you thank you for lending your voice, for lending your prayers, and for not giving up. We have to be in this together. And as Congressman John Lewis always says, we need to push and pull and make some noise.